Democrat lawmakers demanding the acting attorney general testify sooner rather than later. And Republicans are demanding the deputy attorney general testify as well. Whether we'll see either official actually face lawmakers and what it all means for the special counsel's investigation. And the president's choice to become the next attorney general making the rounds on Capitol Hill ahead of the high-stakes hearings next week to confirm William Barr. Whether or not Democrats will make a stand to try to block his confirmation.
I still believe, after the revelations about Mr. Barr's unsolicited memo, President Trump ought to withdraw this nomination.
Things are getting contentious ahead of next week's Senate Judiciary Committee testimony by William Barr, President Trump's pick to replace Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. Committee Democrats plan to grill Barr on his view on the special counsel's Russia investigation, specifically a memo he sent to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein last year. In the memo, Barr criticized Mueller's investigations as fatally misconceived and wrote that President Trump's interactions with former FBI Director James Comey would not constitute obstruction of justice. Here's Minority Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor yesterday.
President Trump is trying to replace folks like Mr. Rosenstein with conflicted loyalists like Matthew Whitaker and William Barr. I still believe, after the revelations about Mr. Barr's unsolicited memo, President Trump ought to withdraw this nomination.
Top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, Senator Dianne Feinstein, meeting with Barr today. And Democrat Senator Patrick Leahy also expected to meet with Barr. Andy, you were shaking your head through that whole thing.
Well, because the memo, Barr, by the way, is, as former Attorney General Mukasey has said, the most qualified candidate to be Attorney General since Robert Jackson. That's how qualified he is. He's already been Attorney General, and he was a terrific Attorney General. The memo does not say that the investigation is fatally misconceived or whatever that.
Where's that come from then?
What it says is that one aspect of Mueller's obstruction investigation is misconceived, and he's completely right about that.
Which one is that?
It's the aspect that says that a president can be held for obstruction on the basis of legitimate exercises of his constitutional prerogatives, like firing subordinate officials or issuing pardons or weighing in on the merits of investigations. What Barr said is a president can certainly be cited for obstruction if he commits traditional obstruction, if he pays off witnesses or suborns perjury. But you can't be cited for obstruction when you do something legal because a mere prosecutor who's an inferior executive official decides to second guess the chief executive's intent. He doesn't get to do that.
Interesting.
Wow.
Okay.
That's Andy McCarthy right there.
But I mean, that's what the memo says. And it's a brilliantly done memo, which is not surprising because Barr was the head of the Office of Legal Counsel during the first Bush administration, George H.W. Bush's administration. Those guys are the lawyers in the Justice Department. And if you read this 20-page memo, it reads like an OLC, Office of Legal Counsel, Justice Department memo. It's actually a stellar piece of legal craftsmanship.
So what other things do you think that they're going to try and throw out there to say that he's not qualified? Because this was, it seemed to us like it was one of those picks where you pick someone who did it under, at the time, I mean, this was during the time of, you know, the funeral of former President George H.W. Bush. And they were talking about how he was the last sort of good, honest, decent man to hold the office. This was, you know, in his groups. It seemed like, and it was somebody who already served. So to the naked eye, it would seem like there's no way this guy can't get through unless in the meantime he's killed someone or something.
In the right kind of world, if we had the right kind of world, he would get confirmed 100 to nothing. Correct. In the world that we're currently in, where everything gets politicized, they'll go after him, but it's not, he's going to get confirmed. Hopefully he'll get confirmed with an overwhelming vote. I'm not holding my breath to see
okay,
that.
it's okay to have questions, and we've seen what a hyper-politicized Judiciary Committee can do and how they can get things wrong. All you have to do is look at Jeff Sessions. I hope the Democrats coordinate and they don't only focus all of their questions on this memo, and I hope Republicans don't just give him a pass. The Attorney General has enough independence that this person is coming into a climate and coming into a time of criminal justice reform and an environment that is completely different than when he served in the late 80s and early 90s. So therefore, he has to be pressed. How are you going to deal with things like civil asset forfeiture? How are you going to move forward this criminal justice reform push that is bipartisan and has the acquiescence of the president? And don't just focus on that memo, because you can waste so much time that you can do the country a great disservice.
You know what? You need to go to that hearing.
Well, I'm looking forward to watching. I'm looking forward to watching self-righteous Democrats like Cory Booker act like they know better than Bill Barr, who is far more qualified than Cory Booker ever will be.
All right. Meanwhile, speaking of the other party, House Democrats have rejected the acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker's offer to testify next month. Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler is insisting Whitaker appear before President Trump's State of the Union address later this month. In a letter to Whitaker, Nadler wrote this: "We must discuss the impact of President's near-daily statements attacking the integrity of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation." This is House Oversight Committee Ranking Member Jim Jordan renewed his calls for Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to testify. Jordan wants Rosenstein to explain last year's report that he talked about invoking the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office. Rosenstein is reportedly expected to leave his post if and when a new Attorney General is confirmed, possibly, in the next week or so. So you've got opposing thirst for testifying. What do you say is within the realm of reality here?
Nothing. It's theater. Nadler wants Whitaker to come in so he can read Trump's tweets to him and say, does the Justice Department agree with this? Does the Justice Department agree with that?
And what does that accomplish?
Nothing.
Well, it undermines. He wants to do it right before the State of the Union address, right? Which is a
political.
Right.
So
the president comes in with all the majesty of the government, such as it is.
Yeah.
So majestic.
And he wants to.
Hopefully,
he wants to
it'll be
undermine
majestically
all that.
running by then. And then on the flip, you've got Jim Jordan.
Look, when the Republicans ran that committee, they couldn't get Rosenstein to come in and testify, and Trump could have ordered him to go testify at any time, and he didn't. So the whole thing is just nonsense.
You called it theater. Katie?
I think Rosenstein has explained enough about the 25th Amendment comment. He said he made it in jest. He went to the White House to explain the comment to the President of the United States, still kept his job. So I think that if he can explain what he said behind closed doors to the President, I think that we.
So why does Jim Jordan want to go after him? Why does he want to hear from him?
I appreciate House Republicans wanting to get accountability for these things. And I think that Lindsey Graham, as a new head of the Senate Judiciary Committee, will actually try and get to the bottom of some of this FISA abuse, get some of these questions answered, and may actually be able to get Rosenstein to come testify on those grounds. But to get him to come testify about a comment that he made in a private meeting is a little bit silly.
That's already talked to the president about, which you pointed out.
The IG's looking into it, too, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's absolutely right. And there are so many conflicts of interest that he still has to answer for, even if he's leaving his post. You still can't commit some of those, political atrocities if you are going to hold that post in the future. If you're going to oversee anything, you have to make sure that you're not acting as a human shield and allowing abuse of power under your watch.
This is the thing that drives me nuts, though. I mean, you say have him come in and get to the bottom of some of this FISA abuse and answer questions about that. I feel like we never get to the bottom of that. We never get any answers.
Why is that?
And even if he came in and said something, what would happen then as a result?
We have seen people fired, though. I mean, for the first time in a while, we've seen people fired at the FBI and the Justice Department.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, there's never been a day that President Trump could not have ordered all this stuff to be disclosed, and he hasn't. Right. So you want to know why it hasn't happened, that's why it hasn't happened.
But even if it gets disclosed, it seems like nothing comes of the idea that if there is FISA abuse, it's not getting corrected. I guess that's my point. I feel as vulnerable as ever before.
Melissa, how can we know that, though? If they put it out and it looks like something really atrocious happened, that they actually took a piece of campaign literature or screed, which this dossier was, and that was the only thing that the judge was asked to make a probable cause finding on. That's
we know
scandalous.
It wasn't the only thing. We know it wasn't the only
then
thing.
Republicans have to stop reauthorizing these surveillance powers, which are so ripe for abuse. And I still blame Devin Nunes for that, because he stood up and championed reauthorizing and empowering these agencies even more with more spy power. And this is what happens when they have too much.
Why didn't Republicans really substantively push against that? You're talking about
but
like Section 702.
A few of them do.
We need we have to have the spy powers.
Is one.
And when they're legitimately used, they're necessary for the protection of the country.
That's the operative phrase there, when they're legitimately used.
Right, and the problem that you have in the country now is this is the one area of the law, national security, where the government has to be able to look the public in the eye and say, you can trust us, we will use these powers properly.
Right.
And the problem with this whole scandal is I care less about what the scandal is about than the fact that they're undermining the government's ability to protect the country with respect to the things we actually need protection on.
Abuse.
That's a good point. That's a great point.
Well, as we await